"Daddy, help me! She locked me in!" The sharp, almost childish scream tore through the oppressive silence of the mansion, making the magnate Elias drop his crystal glass. It wasn't his little Sophia, who had been missing for months, but her voice, perfectly imitated by Falco the parrot. A cold shiver ran down Elias's spine as the bird, flapping its wings frantically, repeated the phrase with a desperate urgency he had never heard before. He looked at his wife, Veronica, who suddenly paled, and he knew. The morning was a sham, and what Falco revealed could destroy his family, or save the only thing that truly mattered. Elias felt the ground give way beneath his feet. The shattered glass on the marble made no more noise than the echo of those words in his mind. "Daddy, help me! She locked me in!" His eyes, once tearful with the pain of loss, now burned with a feverish mix of terror and a faint spark of hope. He turned to Veronica, whose face, once serene in its calculated beauty, was now pale, her thin lips trembling slightly. She attempted a forced smile, but her eyes, once so welcoming, darted away, betraying a dread she could barely conceal. "Elias, darling, don't listen to that foolish bird," Veronica murmured, her voice a tone higher, almost shrill. Her slender fingers clenched into fists, and she took a hesitant step back, as if Falco himself were a physical threat. "He just repeats what he hears. Children sometimes play lock me in with their parents, don't they? And Sophia's voice, he imitates it so well." She gestured with her hands, a quick, nervous movement Elias had never noticed before. But Elias wasn't listening to her. His eyes were fixed on Falco, who, perched on the shoulder of a marble bust, swayed his head from side to side, his green and blue feathers ruffled. The parrot seemed to understand the gravity of the moment, its small, dark pupils fixed on Elias with an almost human intensity. Suddenly, Falco tilted his head, and a new voice, cold and unmistakable, echoed through the room. "You'll never see your father again, foolish girl. No one will believe you." The air seemed to thin. Elias felt a knot in his throat, his hands trembling uncontrollably. The voice was Veronica's. There was no doubt. The tone, the inflection, the veiled cruelty he now realized had always been a part of her, but which his grief and blindness had prevented him from seeing. He watched the blood drain from Veronica's face, which was now livid, her eyes wide, her body rigid as an ice statue. The mask had fallen. The truth, cold and brutal, crashed down on Elias like an avalanche. Sophia was alive, and Veronica was responsible. The grief that had paralyzed him, the pain that consumed him, it had all been an elaborate sham. He felt a wave of nausea, followed by a glacial fury he never imagined himself capable of feeling. The woman he had welcomed into his heart, who had promised to fill the void left by Sophia, was a monster. He needed to act, but he couldn't be impulsive. Sophia's safety depended on his discretion. Elias forced himself to take a deep breath, to control the torrent of emotions threatening to explode. His eyes met Falco's, and in the bird's intelligent gaze, he saw an unexpected ally. The parrot, once merely a link to the joy of the past, was now the key to the future. "Veronica," Elias said, his voice strangely calm, though inside he was in pieces. He bent down to pick up the shards of the glass, a gesture that gave him a moment to compose himself. "You're pale. Perhaps you should sit down." He avoided looking directly at her, fearing that the intensity of his newfound hatred would alert her. Veronica shook her head, her eyes still fixed on the parrot, as if it were the devil. I'm fine, Elias. Just a fright. That bird. He really has a fertile imagination." Her voice was a whisper, and she tried to smile again, but the result was a distorted grimace. Elias knew she was struggling to maintain her composure, to rebuild the facade Falco had just demolished. He needed to be even more convincing. "Yes, a fright," he agreed, slowly standing up. But perhaps it's good that he reminds us of Sophia, of how full of life she was. He made an effort to keep his voice neutral, but every word was a dagger to his own heart. In that instant, Elias swore to himself that he would unravel every lie, expose every cruelty. He would use every resource of his vast fortune, every contact, every ounce of his influence. His investigation would begin now, in secret, right under the nose of the woman who had betrayed his trust and kidnapped his daughter. He looked at Falco, who seemed to observe the scene with an ancient wisdom. Sophia's parrot had become the guardian of a terrible truth, and Elias would be the instrument of its justice. Elias felt the weight of that promise on his shoulders. Heavier than any empire he had ever built, justice for Sophia would not be a legal or financial process, but a silent and dangerous battle within his own home. He watched Veronica, who slowly moved away, her shoulders tense, as if expecting an attack. The scene of the crystal shards on the floor was still fresh, a symbol of the shattered life he now needed to mend. With a sigh that tried to sound like weariness, Elias bent down to pick up the last fragments, feeling the cold marble beneath his fingers. "I'll have someone clean this up," he said, his voice more controlled than his tumultuous heart. "Please, Veronica, try to rest. It's been a long day." He offered a weak smile, a Herculean effort to appear normal, not to betray the storm raging within him. Veronica nodded, but her eyes remained restless, fixed on Falco, who was now silent, observing them with his peculiar intelligence. She seemed like a wounded huntress, still dangerous, but with her guard down. "Yes, a long day," she repeated, her voice almost inaudible. I'm going to my room." She turned and went up the stairs with a haste that betrayed her nervousness, without looking back. As soon as he heard her close the master bedroom door, Elias felt the heavy air dissipate slightly. He turned to Falco, who flew from the bust and landed softly on his shoulder. The parrot rubbed its head against Elias's cheek, a gesture of affection that used to be Sophia's. In that touch, Elias felt a deep connection, a silent alliance. "You're a good boy, Falco," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "You saved us." The first stage of his investigation would be the most delicate, observing without being noticed. Elias knew that Veronica, despite her initial dread, was not foolish. She would be vigilant, perhaps even more so. He needed irrefutable evidence, something that couldn't be denied, that didn't rely solely on the words of a bird, however convincing they might be. His fortune, which once seemed a burden in his solitude, now revealed itself as a powerful tool for justice. He spent the rest of the night in his office under the pretext of urgent work. But instead of financial reports, Elias sifted through old files, forgotten contacts, thinking about who could help him without raising suspicion. He needed someone discreet, loyal, someone who wouldn't be fooled by Veronica's charm or the power of her position. His thoughts flew to an old private detective, a man of few words and great efficiency, a professional who had worked for him years ago on a corporate fraud case. With each passing minute, the image of Sophia, small and smiling, danced in his mind, mingled with the echo of her voice asking for help. Grief had transformed into a motor of action, a relentless force. He could not fail, not after Falco had given him the most painful and precious second chance of his life. Elias outlined an initial plan. First, discreetly reactivate his security contacts, requesting an audit of the mansion's systems, focusing on cameras and access logs that might have been tampered with. Second, prepare a convincing excuse for his temporary absence, which would allow him to move freely. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon when Elias finally allowed himself a brief rest, his mind buzzing. The house was silent, a silence that once seemed peaceful, but now sounded like a well-laid trap. He looked at Sophia's photo on his desk, an innocent smile framed. "I will find you, my daughter," he promised in a whisper, feeling a new wave of determination. The human connection, the purest one, that of father and daughter, would be his compass. Overcoming his own pain and the pursuit of justice were now his sole purpose. The sun was already bathing the mansion's gardens when Elias, exhausted but with renewed clarity, left his office. The silent promise to Sophia echoed in every beat of his heart, dispelling his weariness. He needed to project an image of normality, a heavy but essential disguise. As he descended the stairs, the smell of coffee and the clinking of dishes guided him to the dining room. Veronica was already there, seated at the head of the table, leafing through a newspaper with forced calm. Her eyes seemed opaque, and there was an almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders. She looked up as Elias entered, and a faint smile, which didn't reach her eyes, appeared on her lips. "Good morning, darling. Did you sleep well?" Her voice was soft, but Elias noticed a subtle tremor. Elias forced a smile back, feeling the knot in his stomach tighten. "I had a productive night. There are some urgent company matters." He sat in his usual place, avoiding her gaze, and picked up a piece of toast. Every movement was calculated, every word part of his dangerous charade. He watched Veronica from the corner of his eye. She seemed to analyze his every gesture, trying to decipher an enigma. Distrust, once veiled, now hung in the air like a dense fog. "You seem worried, Elias," she commented, her voice a little firmer but with apprehension. "Is it about business?" He nodded, feigning concern about the numbers. "Yes, and I'm also thinking of reinforcing the house's security. With so many valuable assets, it's never too cautious. I'll ask for a complete review of the systems, perhaps install some additional, more discreet cameras." He observed her reaction. For an instant, Veronica's smile faltered, and her fingers tightened around her coffee cup. "Security. But ours is already so good, darling. Don't you trust our staff?" She tried to mask her surprise with a tone of slight offense, but Elias noticed the flash of panic in her eyes. Falco, who had descended from Elias's shoulder and landed on the table, pecked at a piece of fruit. Elias stroked him distractedly. "It's just a preventive measure, Veronica, for my peace of mind. And frankly, with everything that happened to Sophia, I feel more vulnerable. I need to be sure we're protected, that nothing bad can happen again." The mention of Sophia made Veronica's face twitch slightly, and she averted her gaze to the garden. "Of course, Elias, if it gives you peace of mind, then do it. I'll check with the cook about the lunch menu." It was an escape. He watched her leave, her shoulders rigid, her posture laden with anxiety. As soon as Veronica left, Elias picked up his phone. Alenkar's name glowed on the screen. "Alenkar, I need your help again. It's a delicate, personal matter, and it requires the utmost discretion." The detective's voice, grave and trustworthy, replied, "Always at your service, Mr. Elias. Where can we meet?" Elias explained that he needed a security audit of the mansion, focusing on anomalies, manipulations in the records, blind spots. He didn't mention Sophia or Veronica, only the need for peace of mind after the incident with his daughter. It was a dangerous dance, balancing truth and secrecy. Elias felt the weight of responsibility, but also a renewed strength. Justice would be relentless. He looked at Falco, who observed him with intelligent eyes. The bird seemed to approve, a silent guardian of the hope that was being reborn. Elias felt a shiver of determination run down his spine, a contrast to the paralysis of grief that had dominated him. Falco, on his shoulder, seemed to share that feeling, a silent confidant. Hope, once a faint thread, now wove itself into an unwavering purpose. The image of Sophia, her mischievous smile and her eyes full of life, was the beacon that guided him. The days that followed were a dance of disguises and secrets. Elias maintained an apparently normal business routine, but every contact was a crucial piece in his investigation. Alan Carr, with his legendary discretion, began to work. Security technicians, under the pretext of a system update, moved through the mansion, installing cameras and checking blind spots, looking for manipulation in the records. Veronica, in turn, grew increasingly tense. Her smiles became forced, her laughter shrill. She watched the technicians with suspicion, asking incisive questions about the need for so much security. Elias, with studied calm, assured her it was just for his peace of mind. One afternoon, he found her in the library, leafing through a book, but her eyes were fixed on the window, watching a technician adjust a camera in the garden. Her brow was furrowed with a concern she could barely disguise, a visible crack in her mask of serenity. "It seems they're taking a long time, aren't they, darling?" she said, her voice a little hoarse, without taking her eyes off the technician. So much intrusion for something that already worked well. Elias approached, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder, a gesture that cost him immense effort not to reveal his fury. "It's for our protection, Veronica. Don't worry, soon everything will be as it was before." He felt her shoulder stiffen under his touch, and a shiver ran through him. Falco, perched on a nearby stand, let out a low squawk and flew to Elias's shoulder, nestling in. Veronica visibly flinched at the sound of the bird, and a flash of fear crossed her eyes. She took a step back, turning to Elias with a forced smile. "Yes, of course. For our security." The phrase sounded hollow, almost sarcastic, laden with tension. Each day, Elias felt the net tightening. Alencar sent coded reports, small fragments that, together, painted a disturbing picture. An access log for an unidentified service vehicle on the night of Sophia's disappearance, a blind spot in the recording of an outdoor camera conveniently deactivated, and most intriguing, a small, empty wooden box with a faint smell of sedative found in a guest room Veronica used as storage. Elias felt his heart race with each new discovery. The pain of grief transformed into a cold but controlled rage. He needed to be patient, meticulous. Sophia's life depended on it. Overcoming his blindness and the pursuit of justice were now his driving force. He looked at Falco, who observed him with his intelligent eyes, as if he knew every step and every thought. The parrot was Sophia's living memory, the unbreakable link to the truth. Elias knew he was dangerously close. The mansion, once a sanctuary for his pain, now seemed like a prison of secrets, where every shadow hid a cruel and unimaginable truth. The mansion, once a sanctuary for his pain, now seemed like a prison of secrets, where every shadow hid a cruel and unimaginable truth. Elias felt the air heavy, each step echoing the urgency of his search. Alencar's coded reports arrived with disturbing frequency, each one a piece of the macabre puzzle. The wooden box with the smell of sedative in the guest room, the camera deactivated at the exact moment of Sophia's disappearance, and the record of the unknown vehicle, all pointed to a cold and calculated orchestration. Veronica, in turn, became a restless shadow. Her eyes, once so expressive, now carried an opacity Elias recognized as fear. She avoided direct gazes, her gestures became more abrupt, and her voice often failed to maintain its forced sweetness. One morning, as Elias reviewed some documents in his office, Veronica entered without knocking, which was unusual. She carried a tea tray, but her hands trembled slightly, spilling a drop onto the fine porcelain. "Darling, you're working too much," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "These technicians, they're still around. Don't you think it's enough already? The house looks like a construction site." Her restless eyes swept the room. pausing for an instant on the framed photo of Sophia on the desk before quickly darting away. Elias felt a chill. She was testing him, trying to gauge the depth of his concern for security. "It's for our peace, Veronica," Elias replied, his voice calm though his heart pounded. He took the teacup, feeling the comforting warmth, a contrast to the cold he felt inside. "With everything we've been through, I need to be sure we're safe, and Alencar is very meticulous. He won't leave any stone unturned." The mention of Alencar's name made Veronica's lips tighten almost imperceptibly. She nodded, but the tension in her shoulders was palpable. "Of course, I understand. I just miss our tranquility." She turned, leaving as abruptly as she had entered, leaving behind the faint scent of her perfume and a sense of apprehension. Falco, who was perched on the windowsill, observed the scene with an intelligence that went beyond a simple bird. He flew to Elias's shoulder, rubbing his head against his cheek. In that gesture, Elias felt a silent confirmation, a reminder of the innocence that needed to be rescued. Hours later, Alencar called. His voice was graver than usual. "Mr. Elias, we found something. In the guest room that Mrs. Veronica used as storage, there was a secret compartment under the floorboards, small but enough to hold something valuable, and inside, a small wooden toy, a miniature rocking horse, the same color Sophia adored." Elias's world spun. A rocking horse. Sophia had one exactly like it, which she never let go of. That toy was an extension of her. The discovery was a punch to the gut, irrefutable proof of Sophia's presence in that room, of Veronica's manipulation. The image of his daughter, perhaps frightened, perhaps drugged, being taken from that place, tore at his heart. The rage he felt was overwhelming, but hope, now, was a fire burning intensely. He needed to be strong. For Sophia. "Alencar," Elias said, his voice tense, "keep this an absolute secret. No one else can know. Continue the search for any trace, any clue that might lead to her location, and look for any indication of who might have helped Veronica." Alencar's voice was firm. "Consider it done, Mr. Elias. We're getting closer." Elias hung up. The wooden toy, even without holding it, seemed to burn in his mind. The mansion was not just a prison of secrets, but a dark stage for Veronica's cruelty. He looked at Falco, who gazed at him with deep eyes. "We're getting close, my friend," he whispered, the promise of justice stronger than ever. The connection with Sophia, through that small toy, was the force that propelled him. Elias felt his heart beating frantically, each thump echoing the image of the small wooden rocking horse. That toy, a symbol of Sophia's innocence, was now irrefutable proof of Veronica's cruelty. The mansion, once a refuge, had transformed into a minefield of secrets and lies. He needed caution, but the urgency to find Sophia burned in his chest. Night advanced, and Elias, unable to sleep, mentally reviewed every detail of Alencar's reports. The sedative box, the camera's blind spot, the unknown vehicle. Everything fit into a sinister plan orchestrated by Veronica. The next morning, the tension in the house was almost palpable. Veronica, with deep dark circles under her eyes, tried to maintain a facade of normality, but her restless eyes constantly scanned the surroundings. Elias, in turn, forced himself to appear distracted, immersed in his own thoughts about the company while observing her every move. During breakfast, Falco, who was perched on the dining room chandelier, let out a loud squawk. Veronica flinched, and her gaze fixed on the parrot with a mixture of fear and hatred. "Elias, darling," she began, her voice a little sharper than usual, "don't you think Falco is a bit noisy lately? Perhaps he needs a more suitable space, maybe at the country house. The fresh air would do him good." Elias felt a chill. It was a clear attempt to remove Falco, the inconvenient witness. He looked at the bird, who seemed to understand the threat. Falco is the only living memory of Sophia I have left, Veronica, Elias replied, his voice soft, but with a firmness that surprised even himself. He stays here. He reminds us of the joy Sophia brought. Veronica forced a smile, but her eyes gleamed with contained frustration. Of course, darling. I'm just concerned about his well-being, and yours, of course. You seem so tense. She tried to take Elias's hand, but he subtly withdrew it, under the pretext of adjusting his napkin. That afternoon, while Elias was in his office, Alencar called again. Mr. Elias, we have something more. That service vehicle that entered on the night of Sophia's disappearance. We managed to track it. It belongs to a pet transport company, but with a history of discreet services for high-profile clients. And the driver, he has connections to a former employee of your company, dismissed by Veronica a few months ago. The revelation hit Elias like lightning, an accomplice, and someone from within. The puzzle took on even darker contours. The web of lies was more intricate than he had imagined. Keep investigating this driver and the former employee, Alencar, Elias instructed, his voice laden with new urgency. Find out everything about them, and please, redouble your discretion. Elias hung up, feeling a mixture of fury and even greater determination. Veronica was not alone. This made everything more dangerous, but also opened new doors to the truth. He needed to be more cunning, faster. That night, Elias was in the living room pretending to read a book when Veronica came downstairs. She was dressed to go out, something unusual for a Tuesday night. I'm meeting a friend for a quick dinner, darling, she announced, her voice a little hurried. Don't wait up for me. Elias nodded without looking up from his book. But as soon as the door closed, he stood up. Falco, who was on his shoulder, let out a squawk. It's now, my friend, Elias whispered. Veronica's departure was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He needed to act, and fast. He went straight to the guest room where the rocking horse had been found. The door was unlocked. Elias entered, his heart pounding. He turned on the light and began to search the room with a renewed gaze, looking for anything that might have gone unnoticed. He knelt, running his hands over the floorboards, feeling every inch. If there was one compartment, there could be more. His fingers brushed against a small, almost imperceptible protrusion near the wall. Carefully, he pressed it. A small wooden panel moved, revealing an even more hidden space. Inside, there was a leather-bound diary and a small handmade rag doll. The diary was Sophia's. Elias opened it with trembling hands. The first pages were childish drawings and cheerful notes, but further on, Sophia's handwriting changed, becoming more hesitant, the sentences shorter. I'm scared, Elias read, the words blurred by the tears that clouded his vision. Aunt Veronica said Daddy doesn't love me anymore, that I'm going to live with Grandma Lucia. Grandma Lucia, Veronica's mother, who lived in a distant, isolated town. The truth, cold and cruel, was revealed. Sophia was alive, and likely with Veronica's grandmother. This was the unexpected turning point. Elias felt a mix of relief and dread. He had a name, a place. He had hope. But he also knew that the danger was imminent and real. Sophia's diary in his hands was a weight of hope and despair. Elias clutched it to his chest, feeling the frantic beats of his heart. Grandma Lucia, a name that before had only meant a distant relative of Veronica's, now was the key to his daughter's whereabouts. The isolated town where she lived, information he had ignored for years, now became the center of his universe. He put the diary and the small rag doll into the inner pocket of his jacket, feeling the familiar texture of the fabric. He needed to protect them like a treasure, for they were the most concrete evidence he had. With hands still trembling but a mind sharpened by adrenaline, Elias picked up the phone and dialed Alencar's number. The detective's voice answered on the second ring, the usual readiness in his tone. Mr. Elias, any news? Elias took a deep breath, trying to control the emotion that choked his voice. Alencar, yes, big news. I found Sophia's diary, and it points to Veronica's mother, a woman named Lucia, who lives in a town in the countryside. I need you to locate her immediately with the utmost discretion. Find out everything about her, about the house, about who visits her, and above all, if Sophia is there. Elias's voice was an urgent whisper, each word laden with immense weight. Alencar remained silent for an instant, absorbing the information. Understood, Mr. Elias. This changes everything. I'll mobilize my team. We have a name and a possible location. Rest assured, we will act with the greatest caution. I don't want to alarm anyone. Elias felt a ray of hope, a light at the end of the tunnel of his deep anguish. Thank you, Alencar. My daughter's life depends on this. He hung up, the phone still warm in his hand. The room, once a refuge for his search, now seemed too small for the magnitude of the task. He looked at Falco, who watched him from his shoulder, his intelligent eyes fixed on him. "We're close, my friend," Elias whispered. Stroking the parrot's feathers, Falco rubbed his head against his neck, a gesture of understanding and support that somewhat calmed the storm in his chest. The promise to Sophia echoed in his soul, stronger than ever. Overcoming his pain and the pursuit of justice were his fuel. He needed to project an image of calm, a heavy but essential disguise. Veronica could return at any moment. Elias tidied the guest room, making sure nothing indicated his intrusion. Adrenaline still coursed through his veins, but he forced himself to slow down, to think clearly. Every step, every gesture needed to be calculated. He went down to the living room, picking up the book he pretended to read before Veronica left. He sat in the armchair, his mind buzzing, but his body in a pose of forced relaxation. Time dragged on, each minute an eternity. Finally, the sound of the main door opening echoed through the mansion. Veronica entered, her coat draped over her arm, a tired smile on her face. Her eyes swept the room, stopping at Elias. "Still awake, darling? I thought you'd be asleep." Her voice was a little hoarser, and Elias noticed a glint of apprehension in her eyes. "I lost track of time with the book," Elias replied, forcing a yawn. "How was dinner with your friend?" Veronica approached, placing her purse on the coffee table. "It was pleasant. We talked a lot, but I'm exhausted. I'm going to bed." She didn't linger, going up the stairs with unusual haste. Elias watched her disappear, feeling a knot in his stomach. Veronica's mask was growing thinner, and her fear increasingly evident. He knew he was in a race against time. With each second, Sophia was further away, more vulnerable. But hope, fueled by the discovery of the diary and Alencar's actions, was a beacon. He stood up, walking to the window, looking out into the darkness of the night. Outside, the world slept, oblivious to the drama unfolding within that mansion. But Elias would not sleep. He needed to plan, to anticipate Veronica's every move, every obstacle that might arise. The human connection, the unconditional love of a father for his daughter, was the most powerful force he knew. He would not fail. Falco on his shoulder let out a soft chirp as a silent reminder that he was not alone. Justice would be done, and Sophia would be rescued. That was his sole purpose. Elias remained by the window, the darkness of the night reflecting the storm in his soul. The promise of justice, once a whisper, was now a silent cry echoing through every fiber of his being. Falco, on his shoulder, seemed to share that burden, his intelligent eyes fixed on the void, as if he too awaited the dawn that would bring the truth. The mansion, once a home, now felt like a battlefield, where calm was a weapon and patience a strategy. Sleep did not come to Elias. Every minute of the night was filled with plans, with anticipations of the next steps. He mentally reviewed Sophia's words in the diary, the mention of Grandma Lucia, the isolated town. The image of his daughter, frightened and alone, was a relentless engine. At the first sign of dawn, he was already on his feet, his mind sharp, his body tired, but his determination unwavering. The next morning, the tension in the house was a heavy veil. Veronica came down for breakfast with an unusual pallor, her eyes swollen. She tried to disguise it with makeup, but Elias noticed the cracks in her facade. Her movements were slower, her smile a painful contraction. "Good morning, darling," she forced, her voice raspy. "You don't seem to have slept well." Elias nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "Company worries, Veronica. Nothing for you to fret about." He watched her attentive as she stirred sugar into her tea, her fingers trembling slightly. While Elias was in his office, immersed in papers he could barely focus on, the phone rang. It was Alencar. "Mr. Elias, we have preliminary information about Lucia. She resides on a small, very isolated rural property in the town you mentioned. It's a difficult-to-access area, with few neighbors, and yes, there are indications that a child might be there. A distant neighbor reported seeing a little girl playing in the yard a few weeks ago, but couldn't identify her." Elias's heart leapt. Sophia, alive. The news was a balm to his wounded soul, but also a warning of imminent danger. "Alencar, I need photos. I need visual confirmation. And I need to know everything about the house's routine, the entry and exit points, and the driver and the former employee, any connection to Lucia." "We're working on it, Mr. Elias. Our team is approaching with the utmost caution. Discretion is crucial not to alert them. As for the driver, he has relatives in the same region. Coincidence or not, we'll still investigate. It seems the web is more complex than we imagined." Elias hung up, the phone still warm in his hand. The web! Veronica had not acted alone. Rage bubbled up, but he contained it. The image of Sophia, playing in a distant yard, was the only thing that mattered now. He needed to rescue her. The connection with his daughter, the unconditional love, was the beacon that guided him through the darkness. Falco, who had landed on his shoulder, let out a soft chirp, like an echo of his determination. Elias felt a shiver of hope and urgency. The time to act was approaching. Elias felt the shiver of hope and urgency course through every nerve of his body. The time to act was approaching, and he knew he could no longer delay. The image of Sophia, even if just a glimpse reported by a neighbor, was a beacon that propelled him. He spent the day in a constant state of alert, his mind divided between the facade of a busy magnate and the reality of a desperate father. Veronica, in turn, seemed like a restless shadow. Her eyes, once astute, now displayed a glint of nervousness that she tried, unsuccessfully, to hide. She watched him with an intensity Elias had never seen, as if trying to decipher the secrets he held. That same afternoon, Alencar called again. The detective's voice was restrained, but Elias perceived the gravity in his tone. "Mr. Elias, we've got more. Our field team got close enough to Lucia's property. It wasn't easy, the location is truly isolated, but we have a photo." Elias held his breath, his heart beating uncontrollably. "It's a bit grainy, taken from a distance, but it seems to be her, a small girl with blonde hair, playing near an improvised swing in the yard. She's wearing a little blue dress, Mr. Elias." Elias's world stopped. A little blue dress. Sophia had one just like it, which she adored. The tears which he had held back for so long silently streamed down his face. It was Sophia, alive. The visual confirmation was an electric shock, an overwhelming mix of relief and a contained fury against Veronica. "Alencar," he managed to say, his voice choked with emotion. "Prepare everything. I need to go there. I can't wait any longer. I need to see my daughter. Bring her home." "Mr. Elias, I understand your urgency, but we need a meticulous plan. Any false move could put her at risk. Veronica might have accomplices in the region, or Lucia might be under surveillance. We need a rescue strategy that guarantees Sophia's safety. Alenkar's good sense was a cold shower, but Elias knew he was right. Impulsiveness could cost his daughter's life. "You're right," Elias agreed, wiping away his tears with the back of his hand. "But I can't stand by. I need an immediate action plan. I want you to organize a discreet rescue team with the utmost secrecy, and I'll go with you. I won't be an obstacle. I'll be a presence, a force for Sophia." Alencar hesitated for a moment. "Your presence could be risky, Mr. Elias, but I understand. We'll map out the best route, the best times. We need more information about Lucia, about her habits, about the property's security, and about the driver and the former employee. They do have connections to the region. The former employee, a man named Carlos, is a distant cousin of the driver and has a small cabin not far from Lucia's house. It seems he's been a kind of watcher for Veronica. The revelation of Carlos and the driver's connection to the region and their role as watchers tightened the knot in Elias's stomach even further. Veronica's cruelty was deeper than he had imagined, involving people from his own circle. The betrayal was a bitter poison. "Alencar, speed everything up. I want to be ready to leave in 2 days at most, and keep an eye on Veronica. She mustn't suspect anything." Elias hung up, the grainy photo of Sophia in his mind, the little blue dress. He felt like a caged lion ready to break free. Falco, who had flown to Elias's shoulder during the call, rubbed his head against his cheek as if offering comfort and encouragement. "We're getting close, my friend," Elias whispered, his voice laden with a promise. "Your Sophia will come home." The connection with the parrot, the link to his daughter's innocence, was his anchor. Overcoming his pain and the relentless pursuit of justice were about to culminate in a rescue that would change their lives forever. Hope, once a small thread, was now a strong rope, pulling him forward. He needed to be strong for Sophia. Elias felt the urgency gnawing at his insides, but Alencar's sensible voice echoed in his mind. Caution. For Sophia, he needed to be the rock, the unwavering strategist. The 2 days Alencar had requested seemed like an eternity, but Elias knew that every hour was crucial to ensure his daughter's safety. He spent the night awake, mentally reviewing every detail, every possible scenario. The image of Sophia in the little blue dress, swinging in a distant yard, was the only thing that kept him from collapsing under the weight of his anguish. The next morning, the mansion was immersed in a heavy, almost oppressive silence. Veronica came down for breakfast, her makeup heavier than usual, her eyes still swollen, betraying a night of disturbed and anxious sleep. She barely touched her food, just stirred her coffee with a spoon, the metallic clinking irritating Elias's nerves. "You're very thoughtful, darling," she commented, her voice low, almost a whisper as she watched him. "Is the company giving you problems?" Elias looked up, forcing a tired smile. "There are always challenges, Veronica, but nothing we can't overcome." He felt the weight of her gaze, a mixture of curiosity and growing apprehension. In the office, Alencar called again, his voice restrained. "Mr. Elias, we have more details. Lucia's property has a rudimentary security system, but the biggest challenge is its isolation. The former employee, Carlos, was seen at his cabin last night. He seems to be on alert, and the driver, his cousin, was also seen in the region. They are acting as sentinels, Mr. Elias." The information chilled Elias's blood. 2 men. They were active accomplices, not just manipulated pawns. Veronica's network was more complex and dangerous than he had imagined. "And Lucia and Sophia's routine?" Elias asked, his voice tense, almost a growl. "Lucia rarely leaves. Sophia seems to always be within the property, except for brief moments in the yard. It's as if she's hidden, kept in secret. Deep. We need a plan that takes them by surprise, Alenka. No direct confrontation, no alarming Sophia. She must be traumatized enough already. I want a team that can infiltrate silently, rescue her, and neutralize these men without violence. The absolute priority is Sophia. Elias felt the urgency in every word he uttered. Understood, Mr. Elias. Our team specializes in discreet operations. We will simulate a power outage in the area to disable any systems and create a distraction. Infiltration will be from the back of the property, where the vegetation is denser and offers more cover. And as for Carlos and the driver, they will be contained without alarm, so they cannot alert Veronica. Alenka continued, his voice firm. Departure will be tomorrow night, Mr. Elias. The journey will take a few hours. We'll be there before dawn. Prepare yourself, Mr. Elias. Take only the essentials. And stay calm. Veronica must not suspect absolutely anything. Elias nodded, even though he knew Alenka couldn't see him. The plan was solidifying, becoming real. Adrenaline pulsed through his veins, but he focused on Sophia's image, his beacon. Falco, on his shoulder, rubbed his head against his neck as if sensing the tension and offering his silent, loyal support. We're almost there, Falco, Elias whispered, stroking the parrot's feathers. Almost there. He spent the rest of the day in a state of extreme vigilance, every nerve on edge. Veronica, in turn, seemed more nervous than ever, her movements abrupt and her gaze evasive. She watched him from a distance, her eyes narrowed, as if trying to read his innermost thoughts. During dinner, she knocked over a glass of water, the sound shattering the tense silence of the room. Sorry, darling, she said, her voice trembling as the maids cleaned up the mess. I'm just so distracted lately. Elias merely nodded, his heart heavy. He knew her mask was about to fall completely. Night arrived, laden with promises and imminent dangers. Elias packed his small bag with Sophia's diary and the rag doll carefully stored. He was ready. Justice was on its way, and Sophia, finally, would be free. Elias felt the weight of the small bag in his hand, but it was a light weight compared to the burden he carried in his heart. Veronica was already asleep, or pretending to be. When he descended the stairs silently, Falco perched on his shoulder, his eyes attentive. The mansion was immersed in a stillness that seemed to foreshadow the approaching storm. He left a note on the kitchen table, a vague excuse about an urgent business trip. It was a lie, but necessary to maintain the charade until the last moment. Alenkar's car, discreet and dark, waited on the side street, away from the mansion's spotlights. Elias took a deep breath, the cold pre-dawn air filling his lungs, and got into the vehicle. Alenkar, at the wheel, nodded in acknowledgement. All set, Mr. Elias. The team is ready. The journey was long and silent, city lights giving way to the darkness of the rural road. Elias watched the landscape pass, each kilometer bringing him closer to Sophia. His mind revisited the words of the diary, the image of the rag doll, the little blue dress. A mixture of dread and hope consumed him. Falco, nestled on his shoulder, seemed to sense the tension, occasionally letting out a soft chirp as a reminder of his presence. The sun was beginning to peek over the horizon when they arrived in the area. Lucia's property was a dark patch amidst dense vegetation, exactly as Alenkar had described. The rescue team, trained men and women, was already in position, moving like shadows. Alenkar pointed to a distant spot. Carlos and the driver are in position, Mr. Elias. Our men will contain them without violence, just enough to ensure they don't interfere. The power outage will be simulated in 5 minutes. Prepare yourself. Elias felt his heart race. This was the moment. He squeezed Alenkar's hand, a silent gesture of gratitude. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance. The silence was broken by a distant crack, and the lights of the small property flickered, then went out. Total darkness swallowed the house, and the team moved. Elias, accompanied by 2 agents, advanced from the rear, where the vegetation offered a protective cloak. Every step was calculated. Every dry leaf under his feet seemed like thunder. The smell of damp earth and brush filled the air. They approached the house, a simple construction, but one that now seemed like a fortress. The back door was ajar, a sign that Alenkar's team had already acted. Elias entered, his heart pounding erratically. The interior was dark and silent. Only the muffled breathing of the agents and Falco's contained chirp broke the quiet. He moved through a narrow corridor, guided by a faint beam of light from a flashlight. In a small room, lit only by the crack in the door, he saw her. Sophia, curled up on a simple bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow, a crumpled little blue dress. She was thin, pale, but alive. Elias felt a knot in his throat, tears streaming down his face again. He knelt beside the bed, extending a trembling hand. "Sophia, my little Sophia," he whispered, his voice choked. The girl opened her eyes, wide and frightened, and it took her a moment to recognize him. Her lips trembled, and a small whimper escaped. "Daddy." The sound of her voice, weak and full of fear, broke Elias's heart. He embraced her with all the care in the world, feeling her tiny, fragile body in his arms. Falco flew from Elias's shoulder to Sophia's, rubbing his head against her cheek. "Falco, you came," she whispered, a thread of joy amidst the trauma. That small gesture, the connection with the parrot, was a sign that innocence still lived within her. Elias lifted her, holding her firmly. "We're going home, my love. You're safe now." Lucia, Veronica's grandmother, was found in another room, sitting in a chair, her gaze lost, appearing more a victim of Veronica's manipulation than an active accomplice. She offered no resistance, only murmured disconnected words about fear and obeying. The agents gently restrained her. Carlos and the driver were already under control, tied and gagged, but unharmed, in a shed out back. The priority was Sophia. Elias left the house with his daughter in his arms, the dawn painting the sky with shades of hope. The fresh morning air kissed Sophia's face, and she nestled into her father, her crying now a sob of relief. Justice was only just beginning, but the most important part, the rescue of his daughter, had been accomplished. Overcoming the pain, the relentless search, all culminated in that embrace. Sophia was home. Elias held Sophia with protective strength, her tiny body nestled against his. The journey back was a blur of emotions, each bump in the road seeming like a reminder of life's fragility. Sophia, exhausted and traumatized, fell asleep in his arms, but even in sleep, her small fingers clutched Elias's shirt, seeking security. Falco, on his shoulder, maintained an unusual silence, as if understanding the gravity of the moment and the need for peace. Elias felt a torrent of relief and a deep pain for his daughter's stolen innocence. The tears he had held back for months now flowed freely, not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. He had her back. Upon arriving at the mansion, the sun was already high, painting the sky with shades of a new beginning. Alenkar's team had already acted with the promised discretion. Veronica, unmasked and cornered, was confronted with the irrefutable evidence, Sophia's diary and Falco's recordings being undeniable proofs. Elias did not witness the scene directly, but he knew she had been taken by the authorities, her web of lies finally unraveled. Justice, slow but relentless, was beginning to unfold. There were no shouts or violence, only the cold realization of a betrayal that had almost destroyed a family. Elias felt a strange emptiness, not of victory, but of profound exhaustion. Vengeance was not what he sought, but rather reparation. the truth for Sophia. Lucia, Veronica's grandmother, was referred for specialized care, her mind weakened by manipulation and fear, proving to be another victim in the cruel plot. Carlos and the driver, after being contained, would face the consequences of their complicity. The first few days were delicate. Sophia was quiet, her blue eyes, once full of sparkle, now carried a shadow of fear and confusion. She didn't speak much, but she wouldn't let go of Falco, who became her silent guardian and her strongest link to a happy past. Elias dedicated himself entirely to her. He hired the best child trauma specialists, created an environment of peace and security, transforming Sophia's room into a sanctuary of affection. He read to her, sang the songs she loved, and spent hours just sitting by her side, his constant presence a balm for the girl's wounded soul. Small gestures, like a shy smile from Sophia when she saw Falco imitate a funny sound, or a gentle squeeze of her hand, were giant victories, signs that the light was returning. The mansion, once a stage of lies and grief, began to transform into a home again, filled with love and hope. Every object of Sophia's, every corner that held a memory, was now a reminder of the future they were building together. Elias understood that healing would be a long process, full of emotional obstacles, but he was ready for every step. The human connection, the unconditional love of a father, was the driving force that propelled them. He held Sophia's small hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, and knew that together they would overcome any challenge. Life, though marked by pain and betrayal, was being rebuilt on the foundation of truth, love, and hope. Falco, with his cheerful chirps and loyal presence, was the vibrant link to the innocence that had saved them all, a constant reminder that goodness always finds a way. Months turned into a year. The mansion, once a stage of shadows, blossomed under the sun of hope. Sophia, with childlike resilience, regained her sparkle. Specialists were a pillar, but Elias's love and Falco's presence wove her healing. Her blue eyes, once clouded with fear, now twinkled with the curiosity and joy of rediscovering the world. She still had moments of quietness, but Elias was there with a hug or a gentle story to ward off the darkness. Falco was her faithful guardian. The parrot, voice of truth, was now the playful link to innocence. He flew around Sophia's room, imitating cartoon sounds or repeating funny phrases that made her laugh, a sound Elias thought he would never hear again. One day, as Sophia drew a rainbow, Falco landed on her shoulder and whispered, in the clear voice of the little girl, "Daddy, I love you." Elias, watching from the doorway, felt his heart overflow. Sophia turned, a pure smile on her face, and ran into his arms. That moment proved that life, after the storm, finds beauty and renewal. Elias had transformed. The paralyzing pain had given way to an even deeper serenity. He re-evaluated priorities, dedicating himself to Sophia and social causes, using his fortune to support vulnerable children. Justice for Veronica had concluded with her conviction, and though there was no joy, there was the peace that truth had prevailed. Lucia, the grandmother, received care and showed improvement, a reminder that compassion could reach even the most manipulated. The mansion, once a symbol of wealth and solitude, was now a vibrant home, filled with Sophia's laughter and Falco's chirps. Elias and Sophia spent afternoons in the garden, planting flowers, each bloom a symbol of resilience and growth. He taught Sophia to ride a bicycle, holding her until she gained the confidence to pedal on her own, a mirror of her recovery. One night, as Sophia slept, embracing Falco and her rag doll, Elias sat beside the bed. He observed his daughter's serene face, her chest rising and falling calmly. The past, with its scars, would never be erased, but the pain had transformed into a silent strength. He had learned that love, family, and human connection were the true treasures. Falco, perched on the nightstand, opened an eye and let out a soft chirp as if confirming his thoughts. Elias smiled, a genuine and grateful smile. He knew that the healing journey would continue, with ups and downs, but they were not alone. Together, father and daughter, with the loyalty of a talking parrot, had found their way back to the light. Their story was a testament to resilience, love, and unwavering belief. In the greatest adversities, hope always reborns, stronger and brighter. Life, in its complexity and beauty, had given them a second chance, and they embraced it with every fiber, building a future where joy and truth would be the cornerstones. Joy and truth sustained Elias and Sophia's new world. The first year was an immersion in love and security, a refuge of peace in the mansion. Now, Sophia needed to reopen herself to the outside world, and this transition brought gentle yet profound challenges. Elias watched Sophia, almost 7, playing in the garden. Her blonde hair swayed as she ran after Falco, who flew in circles, chirping joyfully. Her smile was more frequent, her blue eyes regained their sparkle. But Elias noticed hesitations, a gaze lost on the horizon, like a shadow. She preferred the company of Falco and her father, and the idea of returning to school sparked anxiety. "Daddy," she said one day, planting a sunflower, "what if the other children don't like me? What if they ask where I was?" Her voice was small, a whisper, tiny fingers pressing the earth. Elias knelt, wiping her face. "My little flower, the children who matter will like you. As for where you were, we'll share when you feel ready. No rush, my love." He felt the weight of responsibility, the desire to protect her. Enrolling Sophia in a small private school with reduced class sizes was not easy. Elias visited it, spoke with the principal, Mrs. Helena, who promised support. On the first day, Elias led Sophia by the hand, Falco in his cage. The girl squeezed her father's hand, tense. The murmur of children's voices filled the air, and Sophia cowered behind Elias. Mrs. Helena greeted them with a smile. "Welcome, Sophia. We're happy to have you." She offered a rag doll. Sophia took it timidly, her eyes fixed on the floor. Elias felt a pang, but knew it was a necessary step. He hugged his daughter. "I'll be here, my love. Always. Falco will stay home, waiting." Falco, understanding, let out a soft chirp, bringing a small smile to Sophia's lips. The first few days mixed advances and retreats. Sophia observed more than she participated, her drawings vibrant, but she rarely spoke of her feelings. Elias, when picking her up, would ask about her day, and she would respond with monosyllables, but her eyes showed curiosity. Mrs. Helena reported that Sophia was gentle and observant, but reserved. "She adapts at her own pace, Mr. Elias. It's a process. The important thing is that she feels safe." One afternoon, Elias found Sophia in the garden talking to Falco. "Falco, do you think one day I'll be like the other children?" she asked, her voice melancholic. Falco imitated a child's laugh and, in Sophia's voice, said, "Daddy, I love you." Elias, approaching, felt a deep warmth. He sat beside her, embracing her. "You are already special, Sophia. Being like the others doesn't erase who you are, but adds vibrant colors to your rainbow." He kissed her head, feeling his daughter's fragility and inner strength. The healing was long, but each step was a victory. Love, patience, and Falco were the compass. They were building not only a future, but a new version of themselves, more resilient and connected.